How's it going, and welcome to No Fun Alloved's guide series on the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, a 5th edition module. In today's video, we'll be looking at the end game of this fantastic module, going over all the major villains and wrapping up this campaign. Of course, there is going to be a ton of spoilers, so players don't watch this, but DMs don't want that added insight. Stick around because we have a lot to cover here. So the first of the three big baddie groups I want to cover here is the League of Malevolence. Now, the League of Malevolence is going to be tackled in so many different ways because your players could have affected the outcome long before they even got here. As a friendly reminder, your players could have already bumped into two of the members of the League of Malevolence, and of course when they get here, one of them is also isolated right there in one of the first rooms that they get into. So starting off with Zybilna. Zybilna is most likely the NPC of this group that your players have already interacted with. How did your players deal with Zybilna? Did they beat him up right there on the spot? Did they kill him? Did they let him go? Did they ally with him? How did they interact with that? Because that will drastically affect the outcome. Your players have already met Skyla, but Skyla may not actually have appeared as she appears here. How did your players interact with Skyla? Did Skyla just simply stay there and yawn? Did Skyla join the party? Did your players force her to join? Did your players beat her up? Did your players do something that caused her to rejoin the League of Malevolence? How was that interaction? As your players tumble on through this castle, they can see Zargash right there. How did that work out? Did your players suss out his ruse and stop him right there? Or did they think that he was just one of the many frozen creatures around here and didn't do anything about it? And here in this throne room, how did your players interact with this? Do your players just walk in and get into a fight? Do your players already have some information about these individuals because they've talked to other NPCs in this campaign? What do they know about Warduke? What do they know about Kellic? What do they know? If your players had found out that Warduke is greedy, they may be able to get Warduke on their side, which would be a really good thing because Warduke is one of the scarier individuals of this group, and having him on their side would be a great way to even the odds. What do your players know about Kellic? If they hear anything about Kellic, they may know that he's a powerful wizard and want to get the drop on him because he is pretty powerful. He does have a fireball-y effect because this is the first book that introduces the spells that are action sort of thing, and that is very powerful, yes, but at the same time, he is relatively weak. As a friendly reminder, your players are at level 6 or level 7 when they get here. They're pretty freaking strong. They can take a hit and they can deal out a bunch of damage. Now, the League of Malevolence is a fantastic foil in this campaign. They are just the classico villains that are villainous because they are villains. And you can have them here and it's all fine and dandy. But at the same time, maybe you don't like their motivations. Maybe you've changed them up somehow. Or maybe you just don't care about them as much and you decide to have them dealt with by Valor's Call. If you think that the end game is a little bit too crowded with too much going on in this castle, one thing I would strongly suggest is have the Valor's Call members, if they are resurrected and healed and all that fun jazz, brought here. Then Valor's Call can duke it out with the League of Malevolence while your players deal with the other foes in this castle. You can have it be where there's cinematic moments where there's fighting going off on the side and explosions going around this and that, but your players are dealing with other things such as the hags or the Jabberwock or whatever else is floating around here. But if your players love beating up bad guys because they love beating up bad guys, then they are a great foil. Now, Kellic and Warduke in here, along with the 3 cockatrices and all of the glassware golems, is actually a relatively scary fight because Warduke has a ton of HP and can hit like a truck. Kellic can hit like a truck. Cockatrices, they are somewhat scary because they can petrify people, but not permanently, but even still, just the threat of petrification is scary. And the glassware golems just being additions to the fight, especially if they get the drop on, let's say, your back rows, like your casters and your ranged people and all that. That is a relatively scary fight. And if they show up to this fight unprepared, there is a decent chance that they lose. Now, a whole bunch of the other characters in this campaign don't have any reason to kill PCs, but what about the League of Malevolence? They are villains. Why would they not kill the party? Well, there's several reasons for that, right? They could be that they have strict orders to not kill the party because they want to be handed over to the hags. Maybe they want to run some experiments on them. You can come up with a number of reasons why the League of Malevolence wouldn't kill a party. That being said, if you're running a game where PCs get killed, then hey, have at it, right? The League of Malevolence is an extremely unique faction in this game because your players could have whittled away at their foes, your players could have learned all the information that they could have from other people in this land, and depending on how much they acted on throughout the entirety of this campaign, this fight can be made extremely easy, or it could be made extremely difficult. One of the better outcomes is, of course, your players deal with Zagosh on their own, with Zarok on their own, don't even bother with Skyla, and they convince Warduk to come onto their side by saying, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money. In which case, Kellic is going to buckle, because Kellic is basically on his own, especially facing off Warduk. Kellic is not going to be able to do much, in which case Kellic's either going to retreat or Kellic's going to get defeated. So long as you kept some notes on how your players have interacted with this whole interaction of the League of Malevolence, then I'm sure you're going to find the answer. Now, what I will say is the League is a great foil that can be used later on, or they can just be another villain that your players stomp. I always like having villains return to some capacity, so maybe if Kellic is getting beat up a little bit too much, maybe Kellic flies on some broom or just flies away and says, I'll get you next time. The important thing I will say about the League of Malevolence is that while yes, they are villainous villains that villain because they are villains, they each have their own unique personalities. Now, their personalities do consist of them being evil, but at least there is a little bit of a nuance to it, right? You've got Warduk, the greedy one. You've got Zarok, the impatient assassin one. You've got Kellic, the evil wizard one. So play up to their personalities because that's going to make them that much more memorable. Now moving on to another incredible X factor throughout this entire campaign is the Coven of Hags, specifically the Hourglass Coven. Now, depending on the campaign that your players are playing in, if they have fought all of these hags, then maybe there is no hags at the end because they killed them all. Or maybe they fought them, but all the hags always retreated to the next location. Or maybe your players didn't fight them at all, in which case they're all going to be perfectly healthy and have never fought the party before. The hags are insanely powerful. They are incredibly strong. But the thing to consider is, once again, your players are level 6, level 7. They can take hits. They can deal damage. They have a lot of resources and versatility in their repertoire now. So they are able to handle a bunch of situations. Now, the important thing to consider here is the Coven. If they are a full Coven, i.e. not a single one of them has been killed, they are all going to be here. They're all going to be together, side by side, in which case they're going to have their Coven abilities. So what are the Hourglass Coven's abilities? As long as they're within 30 feet of each other, they get the following spells. Detect Thoughts, that's okay-ish. Dispel Magic, that's got some usability. Finger of Death, oh my gosh, Finger of Death. That, even though they are level 6, level 7 at this point, Finger of Death can easily knock out a PC, even potentially kill them, right? Finger of Death is terrifying. Finger of Death is one of those things where if they save against it, then it's not that big of a deal. But if they do not save against it, then that could be just someone knocked out of the fight early, and that is really scary. We also have Glibness. Yeah, it's okay-ish. Locate Creature. Locate Creature at least gives you the reason why the hags know exactly where the PCs are throughout this entire castle. And also Mass Suggestion. Now, Mass Suggestion, the important thing to consider is Suggestion is not mind control. You can't have someone do something that they wouldn't normally do. So Suggestion wouldn't be such a thing as, oh, hey, players, all of you jump off a cliff or whatever. No, it cannot be like that. You probably already know how to handle charm spells against your players, but depending on the sort of group that you have, Mass Suggestion could be completely worthless in a fight, or it could be maybe powerful enough to give the hag some time. Now, mind you, this is all if the Hag Coven is complete. If throughout the entirety of this campaign, your players have dealt with even one of the hags, then the Coven is incomplete, in which case their power level is incredibly weakened. The thing about hags is, if they are a Coven, they're strong, but just one break in the chain and they are significantly less. So for some groups, if they've dealt with one or two, or of course all three of the hags, then this end fight's going to be a lot differently. But if your players haven't dealt with all three of them, then it's going to be a great old clash. Now, why are they here again? It's because they know the players are trying to save the day. They know that they're trying to bust up the cauldron or free Zybilna. So they're going to protect it. Now, how do they go about protecting it? Is that going to be them storming around the castle, just chasing down the PCs? Is that going to be them just sitting in front of the cauldron, protecting it like bodyguards? Are they going to be poking around the corner, Scooby-Doo style, just waiting until the PCs appear so they can get the jump on them? How is that going to play out? Also, something to consider is the reason why the hags were such a menace throughout this whole campaign isn't just because of their own individual abilities. While individually, yes, they are strong, what also makes them strong is the influence that they have on the land, is all the minions that they have to command. In which case, how is that going to work out? Do they simply just come here without any sort of reinforcements? That seems a little bit silly to me. They are pretty smart. Why would they just show up by themselves, right? Maybe you could have it where Bavlorna brings in some bullywugs. Maybe you could have it where Skabatha brings a whole bunch of iron soldiers, where Endelyn brings a whole bunch of goblins and shadows, and maybe similar of the like. But they only do that if they were not kicked out of their domain. So your players could have already fought the hags, and if they had fought the hags and kicked them out of their respective domains, that means they still show up to the final fight here, but they do not bring in the reinforcements. That right there is a great way to reinforce your players' deeds throughout the entirety of this campaign. What have they done in order to facilitate a better future? Now, reinforcements or not, the hags are still kind of scary. Bavlorna can swallow people, Skabatha's got some poison claws, Endelyn can actually make people move around the battlefield. All those things are pretty scary. They hit pretty hard, they have some battlefield control, they each have spells, and of course if they are the Coven as a whole, they've got their Coven spells. They've got a whole bunch of versatility to them. Wherever they fight in the castle, even if it is just in a boring location as around the cauldron, there's still a lot of fun to be had there. Now, if your players have the unicorn horn, they could run past all these hags and try and free the land, and of course try and free Zybilna. If they know the actual name, then maybe that does happen throughout the entirety of the interaction there, specifically the combat encounter. And that right there would be a fun encounter where your players are having to duck, dodge, and weave a whole bunch of magic spells and whatever else in order to free the land. But what I presume is that most groups want to beat these hags up because these hags have been a thorn in their side for far too long and they want to get a big old smackdown. In which case, let it happen, because fights with hags covens are always awesome, right? Now, I personally don't like the hags getting killed outright because, once again, I think they're smarter than that. They could just simply, if they get down to low HP, go into another plane and are unable to be attacked. Or, one thing I strongly recommend is, if they get knocked down to 0 HP, instead of them melting away or getting killed outright, they become some sort of effigy that is representative of them. Bavlorna becomes a frog, Skabatha becomes a puppet, and Endelyn becomes a mannequin. You know, you can have those things basically represent who they are, and maybe they can be destroyed or maybe they cannot be destroyed, but that represents, you know, your player's ability to overcome this fight. And maybe they keep the effigies that is these hags, maybe they turn them over to Zybilna, or maybe they go out of their way to destroy them. Who knows? Regardless of where the combat goes down, regardless of how the combat goes down, make it memorable. Because these were the antagonists the whole way through. Your players only came here because of these hags, right? Your players came here because these hags are terrible people. And your players probably want to deal with them. So make it worthwhile, make it enjoyable, make it fun, and make sure that whatever tricks up the hag sleeve that they got, make sure that they come out full force swinging, because that's going to make that in combat that much more enjoyable if your players succeed. And lastly here for the villains in the finale, we have the Jabberwock, the glassiest of glass cannons. This thing is terrifying and incredibly weak at the same time. Only 115 HP, whatever, that's worthless. You know, basically that will get knocked out in a single round at level 7 because the fighter can attack 4 times with their action surge, and the paladin can hit this thing and smite it, and the wizard can cast a big old fireball or, you know, whatever, right? This Jabberwock will easily get knocked out in just one round of combat. But of course, your players may not even have a chance to get to attack this thing, right? That confusing burble right there is terrifying. DC 18 charisma saving throw out to 30 feet away from it. And if you fail this 18 charisma saving throw, Then you roll a d4, and on a 1 or 2, nothing happens. On a 3, you just move in a random direction, and on a 4, you attack a friend. That is so disruptive, and it just keeps on happening again and again and again. Oh my goodness. Most people are going to fail this saving throw, because most people aren't even proficient with charisma saving throw. And even if you are proficient with charisma saving throw, that may not even be a stat that you have that is high up, right? So on average, most people are going to fail. So on a group of 5, then only theoretically 1 person succeeds, right? That is so bad. If your players do not know anything about the Jabberwock and they just simply fight this thing, then they're probably going to lose. Because this thing hits like a truck, because your players can't do anything. They're, a quarter of the time they're even hitting each other, right? Very terrible. Now, if your players had gone out of the way to learn some information about the Jabberwock, this can be made incredibly easy. Because if they hear that this thing lets out a burbling kerfuffle that hurts people, then maybe your players stock up on something to prevent that from happening. Maybe your players gather some earwax or beeswax or, whatever to cover their ears so that they can't hear anything. Maybe someone casts silence in the party so you don't have to hear the thing. Your players can get really creative with this, right? And I say reward that creativity. Now, what I will say is just covering your ears like that is not good enough to defend against a large creature because, you can't, right, it just doesn't work. But if they come up with an actual logical reason as to how to make it so that they can't hear this thing, then I say let it fly. And it's going to be great. And speaking of letting it fly, of course, another way your players could deal with the Jabberwock is not even directly dealing with it, but by freeing the rock. Because Bloody Beak is a terrifying rock, and Jabberwocky would be terrified of it. So the Jabberwock truly is, once again, another one of these combat encounters where if your players did a little bit of extra work outside of this engagement, that will go an incredibly long way. If they learn about its terrible gaze and they learn about its terrible burbling, or if they learn that it's scared of Bloody Beak, then they can save themselves. But if they don't do anything outside of that, if they just like going room to room, slaying monsters, and don't hear anything of it, then this is an easy wipe. So hopefully your players do something about it. Hopefully your players cover their ears or cast a silence spell or do whatever. And of course, if they free Bloody Beak, then as soon as the Jabberwock approaches, then maybe Bloody Beak appears like a Deus Ex Machina, but at least your players are the one that activated the Deus Ex Machina, and the Jabberwock runs away. That right there is great. Whenever your players know why they're being saved versus just being saved just because. That's always a terrible feeling of, oh, the DM's just, hand-waving everything. No, have them be rewarded for their actions. Also, very unlikely chance, but still a potential, is your players could just decapitate the Jabberwock with the Vorpal Blade that they find around here. Technically possible, but it's very hard to bank on crits in a D20 system, so is what it is. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, there's all these villains floating around here. We got the League of Malevolence, we've got the Coven of Hags, we got the Jabberwock, and we've got whatever sort of monsters are else floating around here. But theoretically, if your players are creative enough, if they are sneaky enough, then they could figure out Zybilna's true name and free her, and then she can just snap her fingers and make them all go away. Once again, rewarding players for their actions. Even if they are subverting all the other people's actions, that's fine, because they are rewarded for approaching this in a not so heavy-handed way. So speaking of that, let's move on to the finale, once your players free Zybilna. Now, there are 2 ways to free Zybilna. Either 1, they destroy the cauldron, or 2, they touch the unicorn horn upon her and say aloud her true name. Now, when it comes to destroying the cauldron, the only way they can do that is by using the flame brand that is, of course, held by Warduke. Now, how do they go about getting that? Either 1, they hire him by giving him a whole bunch of gold. 2, they beat him up and take it. And that's pretty much it, right? Now, of course, there is the possibility where Warduke, runs away, in which case they don't get the flame brand, in which case no destroyed cauldron, right? But if they beat him up and take it, or if they hire him and say, hey, Warduke, we'll pay you to hit that cauldron real quick, then they can just destroy the cauldron and easy peasy. That might not be in the realm of possibility for some groups, so for those other groups, they're going to need that unicorn horn, and they're going to need to place it upon her and say aloud her true name. Now, this is a great reveal if your players don't know her true name, because if they just say aloud Zybilna, then they will know that is not her true name. Now, one thing I would strongly suggest is there is no way your players could have learned her true name throughout the entirety of this campaign, because I think that specifically finding out in this castle is great. Specifically on the second floor, there's a ton of great little tidbits and hints and secrets and stuff. That's great. Now, one thing it could be is your players maybe have the inkling that this is Tasha, or Natasha, of the Tasha's Hideous Laughter. I think that's perfectly fine for them to slowly figure out those details, because they saw the Tasha's Hideous Laughter machine in the carnival, and at Loom Lurch they saw Tasha's portrait there hanging in the little room there. I think that's totally awesome if they learn that, oh hey, this is actually Tasha, that's awesome. But once again, that's not her true name. Her real name is Igwilv. So your players touch the horn upon her, say aloud her true name, but it's not her true name. And then they go, oh crap, we gotta look around here. And when they go to that second floor, they can learn all this juicy details about her life, about her past, about her present, and about her future. And that's great. Your players can see the person that she once was, the person that she is, and the person that she will be. So in between looking at all the info and little bits and pieces of info that they can find up there, there's also the NPCs floating around here, such as Sean and Thinnings, that can slowly give a little bit of the hints. And there's also the Quasit floating around as well. Once your players finally piece together all these clues, they can figure out her true name, her real identity. She is Igwilv. And if they speak aloud her true name, summon her forth, and then she'll come out saying, oh, drats, I'm too late. And then she will immediately get to work trying to fix the situation. She will immediately start banishing or imprisoning all the bad guys around here. She'll immediately start trying to fix up the castle. She'll immediately start freeing everyone from their frozen domains. But also equally importantly is she's going to reward the party. Now, on rewarding the party, if your players had done some terrible deeds, or if they are working alongside the bad guys, because that's the way the campaign went, then this is going to wrap up a little bit differently. But if your players were good through and through, then she's going to greatly reward the party. Now, there is several stipulations there on if she killed some of the, good aligned NPCs around here, or if she killed some of the dretches upstairs, then she will be a little bit miffed to the party. But if she is absolutely ecstatic with, what the party's deeds have been this entire way through, then she will greatly reward the party. She'll be saying, hey, I can grant you any wish that you want, as long as it's within reason. And that's great. That is such a fantastic reward for doing all their good deeds. I see a lot of time in all of these adventure modules that, oh, hey, you saved the world. Here's a random magical item. I mean, come on, we just saved the world. This adventure isn't even about saving the world. This adventure is about saving just a small, somewhat weird fey kingdom. And you get a big old wish out of it? That's a great reward. Now, Igwilv, or Zybilna, has this big old stat block associated with her. But quite frankly, I don't think you should need to use it. Maybe you can just show it off if there is any bad guys still lingering around here, just to show off how incredibly powerful she is with this bewitching bolt and this abyssal rift and, whatever else. You can totally show that off if you want, but I don't think you need to. I think your players will understand how incredibly powerful she is anyway. Regardless, your players can earn themselves a fantastic reward, and they can go back to the world that they once knew. Now, I noticed that there is this thing of, oh, hey, she can revert back time to when you were kids before you had your thing stolen, but I don't know how many people would actually opt on going through puberty again. I don't know how many people would actually take up that deal, but whatever. But the cool thing to consider here is this is not the end, right? One thing that I did with my group, and I know a lot of people are going to do, is have the ability to have this be the start of a new Fae campaign, as acting as agents on the behalf of Zybilna. If their patron now is this incredibly powerful person, then they can go about the lands of Fae and do a whole bunch of great things in her name. That's a great extra set of campaigns right there, right? Your players go to the Summer Court. Your players go to other Fae Domains of Delight. Your players go to all these sorts of fun locations. A lot of great things can be stemmed from this interaction here. But much like how your players were creative throughout this whole campaign, dealing with all the bad guys and trying to free Zybilna, be creative with what the future is to come. Maybe this is the end of the campaign and you put the characters down and move on to the next campaign. But if you want to continue with those characters, then skies are the limit. Specifically the Fae skies. Or maybe, you know, maybe the Fae actually interacts with the real world somehow. Who knows? The great part about this campaign is that even though it seems linear, even though it seems like you're on a railroad track the whole time, the choices and interactions your players have with all of the NPCs along the way will drastically affect the outcome. How many villains are going to be showing up to that grand finale? Who is going to be there? Who's not going to be there? Who made it? Who didn't make it? What do you players know? What do you players not know? And I love the fact that you can run this campaign so many different times with so many different groups, and you're going to get so many different results. Even if they still always show up to this castle, who's showing up to the castle? What do they know ahead of time? And how do they interact with all the NPCs once they finally get here? I assume most groups are going to be along the good aligned route, but maybe you have some groups that align themselves with the League of Malevolence. Maybe you have some groups that devote themselves to the Coven Hag. Maybe you have some groups that try and have the Jabberwock as a pet. Who knows, right? I truly do enjoy this end game because, one, I think the castle is just an absolutely fantastic dungeon filled with a whole bunch of good little bits and pieces. I love all the interactions that your players can have with all these characters that they've gotten to know, love, and hate throughout this whole campaign. And I love this grand finale of freeing Zybilna. And once again, maybe if there's villainous groups, maybe they try and, you know, control Zybilna in some way. It's probably not going to work. But regardless, right? I think that there's just so many great things going on here. It works so incredibly well, and it's just a great story. This adventure is a good coming-of-age adventure. This is a great adventure to get people inducted into the land of, you know, crazy shenanigans. I just love this end finale here. Now, on a typical end game note, once your players have dealt with the hags and dealt with the League of Malevolence, or your players, of course, have just freed Zybilna, and Zybilna, you know, controls everything and hand waves all the hags away and the League of Malevolence away, then there's probably going to be a grand old feast or a grand send-off for the players as the players get sent back to their regular realm. In which case, go ahead and show off all the friends that they made along the way. Show off all the good deeds that they've done, all the people that they saved, all the friends and foes. You know, show those things off because that's going to make that impactful and it's going to make them remember all the awesome things that they did. When I ran the finale for this, it was a good old tearjerker because my players had made so many friends throughout this whole campaign, and now they're going to regularly return to this place and be agents for Zybilna, and it's going to lead to further and more fun adventures, and I can't wait for that. And I can't wait for you all to tell me how your finale is going to wrap up. Tell me all about it. Tell me about the League of Malevolence. Who's showing up? Who's not showing up? What about the Coven? Who's showing up? Who's not showing up? Are they going to be a full Coven and they're going to blast the party with that finger of death? Or is the Coven broken? In which case they're going to have to be a little bit more creative. And are they bringing reinforcements? How do you imagine your players are going to deal with the Jabberwock? Are they just going to walk in blindly and get themselves wrecked? Or are they going to know ahead of time to protect themselves? Or are they just going to free Bloodybeak and try and get Bloodybeak on their side? Tell me those things because I would love to hear it. But that is going to do it for me. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. And thank you to my amazing patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.